Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with Thea Goldman, who is a freshman at Sturgis Charter Public School, and Kate Dunigan AtLee, who is a librarian at Sturgis and who is also the coordinator for Sturgis's Poetry Out Loud program. Welcome to the show to both of you.
Thank you.
Hello.
And now Thea recently came in first in the Poetry Out Loud regional semifinals that were held at the Cultural Center of Cape Cod in Yarmouth here on the Cape. And so congratulations on that. And that meant that she got to go to the state championships in Boston. And so tell me how it went in Boston.
It went pretty good. I unfortunately was sick during the time, so I didn't do fantastic, but it was still fun.
Now let's start by telling our listeners what Poetry Out Loud is, because when I first heard about this, I thought it might be a slam poetry competition, but it turns out that's not what it is at all. Kate, can you explain it?
Sure. Poetry Out Loud is a national poetry recitation competition, and so students in high school throughout the country participate first at their classroom level, and they compete against their classmates. Then they go to a school competition, and the winner of the school competition goes to a regional competition, which is what Thea did. And then at the regional competition, we have, I think this year there were 18 students in the Cape Cod and South Coast region competing, and Thea was chosen as one of 6 to move on to the state finals in Boston. So the state final competition had 24 students participating, and the winner of that competition goes on to a national competition.
And so this competition is really about memorizing a poem written by someone else, as opposed to slam poetry, which sometimes is a poem written by the person who is saying it. And so I guess one of the critical things here is picking your poem. So Thea, tell me how you go about picking the poems that you want to do.
Well, they have a list on their website, and I went for poems not that I thought would be, particularly good for the, scoring of it, but just the ones that I thought were cute and clever and funny.
So you pick your poems from this anthology of poems that I guess are put out annually by the organizers. And so why don't you tell us what poems you picked and why you picked them?
My first one that I picked was Cartoon Physics, Part 1 by Nick Flynn. And I picked that one just because I really liked the subject matter and it made me laugh. And the second one I picked Ecology by Jack Collum. And that one I actually didn't pick at first, but then I went on YouTube and searched up someone doing it, and it was fantastic. It's super fast and it's almost like a rap. So I picked it because it looks like it would be really fun to recite. And then the last one, The Maldive Shark by Herman Melville, I picked there was one of the requirements is that one of your poems are pre-20th century, sorry. And that one was it was very sort of creepy sounding almost, and I thought it was very fun, and it was also pre-20th century.
They're all very different, and so it's interesting to hear why you picked them. So I think maybe we should get right into the poetry, and perhaps you could recite the first one, the one that it's got some humor to it and maybe is the easiest one to understand what it's all about. So why don't you go ahead on that one?
Cartoon Physics Part 1 by Nick Flynn. Children under, say, 10 shouldn't know that the universe is ever expanding, inexorably pushing into the vacuum, galaxies swallowed by galaxies, whole solar systems collapsing, all of it acted out in silence. At 10, we are still learning the rules of cartoon animation, that if a man draws a door on a rock, only he can pass through it. Anyone else who tries will crash into the rock. 10-year-olds should stick with burning houses, car wrecks, ships going down, earthbound, tangible disasters, arenas where they can be heroes. You can run back into a burning building. Sinking ships have lifeboats. The trucks will come with their ladders. If you jump, you will be saved. A child places her hand on the roof of a school bus and drives across a city of sand. She knows the exact spot it will skid, at which point the bridge will give, who will swim to safety, and who will be pulled under by sharks. She will learn that if a man runs off the edge of a cliff, he will not fall until he notices his mistake.
Love this poem, and I hadn't been familiar with it, and I love how you say it, so I understand now why you did so well in the competition. It's about childhood and maybe keeping children free from the worries of the real world, and it has that humor about talking about the cartoon world. That's a lot of fun. And so, Kate, when you coach the kids on these different poems, what do you tell them about how they should be saying the poems?
So the first thing I tell them is that they should pick a poem that really speaks to them. It's a lot more fun for everyone if they pick a poem that they love, something they connect to in some way. And we talk about things like pacing. We talk about understanding the poem and how we can communicate the meaning of the poem. Because poetry out loud, as you noted, it's not spoken word. There's no real motions that go along with it. You're not acting out the poem. You're really using your voice to communicate all the meaning of the poem. And so you've got to understand the poem and really understand the phrasing, where you're going to pause, and all of those sorts of things to convey the meaning.
And what do you like about the way Thea said that poem? Because I loved the way she said it.
I absolutely loved it, and I love the way she did her other poems as well. So what I like is that you can tell that Thea understands the poem by the way that where she paused, how she put the sentences together. You could tell that she wasn't just reciting it because she had memorized it, but that she really got the humor in the poem and was able to convey that.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with Thea Goldman, who lives in Brewster and is a freshman at Sturgis Charter Public School, and Kate Dunigan AtLee, who is the advisor to the Poetry Out Loud program at Sturgis and a librarian at Sturgis. And we're getting right to the poems. I know the second poem that you read at the Poetry Out Loud competition is your favorite, so why don't we do that one next?
Sure. Ecology by Jack Collum. Surrounded by bone, surrounded by cells, by rings of hell, by hair, surrounded by air is a thing. Surrounded by silhouette, by honey-wet bees, yet by skeletons of trees. Surrounded by actual, yes, for practical purposes, people. Surrounded by surreal popcorn, surrounded by the reborn. Surrender in the center to surroundings. Oh, surrender forever, never end her, let her blend around. Surrender to the surroundings that surround the tender endo-surrender that tumble through the tumbling, to that blue that curls around the crumbling, to that, the blue that rumbles under the sun, bounding the pearl that we walk on, talk on. We can chalk that up to experience, sensing the brown here that's blue now, a drop of water surrounding a cow that's black and white, the warbling Blackburnian twitter that's machining midnight orange in the light, that's glittering in the light green visible wind. That's the ticket to the tunnel through the thicket, that's a cricket's funnel of music to correct and pick it out from under the wing that whirls up, over, and out.
So, I understand it much more now that I heard you say it than I did when I read it, and so maybe that's part of what's going on here with this competition.
Absolutely.
That the way someone says it really explains it to you. It's a much darker poem, obviously, than the first one, and it really uses words as music and sort of playing with the sounds of words and repetition. What is it about it that you love so much?
I love that it's sort of like the whole phrase, like music, poetry is music or whatever. It's pretty well shown in this one, which is basically like, it's like a piece of music more than it is a poem. It's so rhythmic, and you have to say it in like the right syncopation almost for it to really get across.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that the way you say this poem, because again, it's a tricky one, really helped in the competition because you said it so beautifully. Now, the third poem, it's Herman Melville. You had to pick an older poem, something from pre-1900, I think you said.
That's right.
And so you picked Herman Melville, and why don't you go ahead and do that one for us?
Sure. The Maldive Shark by Herman Melville. About the shark, phlegmatical one, pale sot of the Maldives sea, the sleek little pilot fish, azure and slim, how alert in attendance be. From his saw pit of mouth, from his charnel of maw, they have nothing of harm to dread, but liquidly glide on his ghastly flank, or before his Gorgonian head, or lurk in the port of serrated teeth in white triple tiers of glittering gates, and there find a haven when perils abroad, an asylum in jaws of the fates. They are friends, and friendly they guide him to prey, yet never partake in the treat. Eyes and brains to the dotard, lethargic and dull, pale ravener of horrible meat.
So this poem about a shark, and kind of fun for us here on the Cape because we hear a lot about sharks here. Is that one reason you picked it?
I actually didn't even realize that it was actually about a shark until after I picked it. So I just picked it because of the words in it. It was so, eerie, sort of.
And it has some difficult words in it as well, and so you probably had to figure out what some of those meant. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the competition, I think, Kate, that you were saying, is that the students have to really figure out the meaning of the poem so that when they're saying it, they're speaking it properly.
They do. It's a great way to learn vocabulary, too.
Now, Thea, how did you prepare for this competition? I'm sure it must be nerve-wracking, and of course we had the local one here at the Cultural Center of Cape Cod, but then to go all the way up to Boston. How do you prepare?
I practice in the shower, basically. I just do it over and over and over, and just do the motions over and over and over countless numbers of times, usually in the shower.
So you do it over until you've got it, and I'm sure there's a lot of time maybe studying the poem first and figuring out what it all means.
Yeah, especially for the last one, I had to look up so many words in that one because it's so old-timey, but yeah.
Now, are you interested in writing your own poetry? Have you tried that?
Not really. I've done it a couple of times, but I'm more interested in the acting part of it.
Interesting. And I was looking at the website of Poetry Out Loud, and they were talking about advice for the judges and so forth, and they seem that they're very particular about things like not being sing-songy, and it's interesting that you mention acting because they don't want it to be too actorly, and there are lots of criteria. Tell us a little bit about that, Kate.
Sure. So there are a lot of criteria. It's interesting that we try to put some concrete objective criteria around something so subjective as poetry. But the judges are given a very strict rubric that they follow. And so, one of the pieces of that rubric is dramatic appropriateness. So there is some gesturing in Poetry Out Loud. You'll see the competitors use their hands a little bit, but you're not seeing them walk around the stage. You're not seeing them really act out the poem. They're really using their understanding, the phrasing, the tone of voice goes a long way toward communicating the poem.
Absolutely, and I know, in fact, one of the people talking about the different criteria on the website, they were talking about that the poem in this case is the protagonist, and in slam poetry, the poet is more the protagonist because there really is a lot of acting involved.
That's an interesting way to put it.
And Thea, I know that you're putting a lot of yourself into as you talk about the poem. We can tell the parts that you think are funny and the parts that you think are interesting just by the way you talk about the poems. When you work on the poems, do you work on that sort of inflection that you put in?
Oh, yeah. That's what I'd say I work on the most. I work on the little details of which word should be most enthused and whatever, especially with the middle one, I'd say. The ecology, that one took a lot of nitpicking.
Now, when you did, I guess, at Sturgis, do you have a school competition? And so maybe that was the first step for Thea to get through the school competition?
The first step was for her to compete against the other students in her English class. So she won her class competition, and then she went to our school competition, and she won our school competition.
And how many students were in that one?
In our school competition, we had 13 perform this year.
And they were probably all ages because Thea, of course, is a freshman. So did you have seniors? as
We
well?
didn't have any seniors this year. So at Sturgis, the Poetry Out Loud program is compulsory for 9th and 10th grade. And we invite our juniors and seniors to participate if they want to. They don't have to. We did have some juniors participate this year, but no seniors.
And then when you went on to the Cultural Center of Cape Cod, what was that like?
Scary. They were better. It was fun, though.
It was students, I think, not just from the Cape. It was really the whole
right.
region.
The South Coast as well, and Martha's Vineyard.
And those students were maybe some older ones at that competition.
Yeah.
Is that right? Some seniors, maybe?
There were some from all grades.
Yeah, and that one, as you said, Kate, that 6 students were chosen at that one to go on to the next level.
So there are 4 regional competitions in Massachusetts, and in the Southeast region, 18 performers from the region came together, and 6 went on to the state finals in Boston.
But I think Thea was maybe the only one from the Cape that went on. Is that right?
She was.
So that was a big
exciting
deal.
Yeah.
And so going up to Boston, and I think they had a special venue for you to be doing this in. Tell us about that a little bit.
So they did it at the Old South Meeting House, which was pretty cool because that's a pretty historic building. And it was like divided into 3 rounds. And the last round was only the top 6. So I didn't get to do that round, but I did the other 2, and they were very good. There were a lot of very, very good poetry readers at that.
And I'm sure you were great, too, and I bet the acoustics in there were terrific, so you could really do your thing. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed hearing you recite the poems, and that was really a treat. And unfortunately, we're out of time. I've been talking to Sturgis freshman Thea Goldman and her advisor, Kate Dunigan AtLee, who is a librarian at Sturgis, about the recent Poetry Out Loud competition. Thank you both for being here with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.